Okay, I need to be honest with you guys. Trying to record this portion of the chapter has always been difficult. So if you notice, I've not been uploading as much. And this subchapter, particularly contraction of skeletal muscle, is because it is a very difficult part of the chapter for me to teach. Not only because of the subject matter, because it's quite a complicated subject matter, personally, in my opinion, and there are a lot of things that I have to try to simplify and still make it relevant for exam questions. Because the problem with trying to teach contraction of skeletal muscles is either, from what I notice, is either teachers usually overcomplicate it to a point where it becomes too esoteric, to a point where it's lost in the students, or it becomes too oversimplified, which perhaps can be an insult to the student's intelligence. So trying to balance the two between making it too complicated and too simplistic has always been a problem for me, especially when it comes to this. So I'm going to try my best to teach this one to the best of my abilities. Now, when we talk about contraction of skeletal muscles, so you will notice that I'll have to repeat a lot of things over and over again. Like, even though this is a video format and you can rewind the video, I want to try to make it as organic as possible. So I hope it. So if I keep repeating a point over and over again like a broken record, just understand that, I'm trying to keep it as natural as possible. Now, if you remember, skeletal muscles have to contract so that they can move specific parts of your body. So I'm drawing out a relaxed muscle over here. You can see that. And the orange parts are the tendons. You don't have to know that in detail. But in reality, what exactly happens to a muscle when it contracts? We know, if some of my students who they are into physical education and physical fitness, they would know that when a muscle contracts, what actually happens is it bulges, okay? It bulges, as you can see over there at the bottom. But the point is, I also want you to notice the length. What has happened to the overall length of the muscle? The overall length of the muscle has reduced. The relaxed muscle is longer and the contracted muscle is shorter. So the point that I'm just trying to make over here is, if a muscle needs to contract, the overall length has to become shorter. So you're like, good, I get that part. But also remember that inside the muscle, which the muscle fibers, which are the syncytium of the cells, they contained these things called myofibril, as I'm showing it to you right now. Okay, the myofibril. I'm just going to draw out one myofibril. So this is the myofibril of the relaxed muscle. I'm just taking the myofibril out. And the reason why we're just focusing on the myofibril is because, the myofibril is the part that does the contraction for the muscles. Remember, I told you the myofibril has areas which are darker and lighter. We talked about the reason why they are darker and lighter. Lighter because of actin filaments, darker because of myosin filaments, correct? So the light area, the dark area, all that's fine. And then we also had the Z lines, which are found in the light area, and the M lines, which are found in the dark area. And of course, the distance between the two Z lines are referred to as something called as the sarcomere. Okay, I did mention that as well. Now, so the question is, how does the myofibril of the contracted muscle look like? So will there be any difference? Because if you see the contracted muscle is shorter, right? So will there be any changes in the myofibril? And the answer is yes. Right off the bat, you notice something rather odd. You notice that, there are some dark areas and light areas, that's fine, but there's also some much darker areas in the myofibril. So what exactly is going on over there? Where did that very dark area come from? And also look at the overall length of the myofibril. The overall length of the myofibril, I know it's just a section of it, but the length of the myofibril has also become shorter. So the question is, how did that exactly happen? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take out one sarcomere section. Sarcomere is just basically the distance between one Z line and the next Z line, right? So I've taken that one out. And I'm just going to enlarge the image to explain to you what's going on in the myofibril. So you can see here, beautiful here. Oh, I'm complimenting my own drawing, but you get my point. you can see the light areas and the dark areas. That's fine. Dark is because of myosin, light is because of the thin actin filaments, all good. But in the myofibril of the contracted muscle, we notice that the dark areas start to appear. So what's the reason why the dark areas actually start to appear? Let's go through it. The light areas, as I'm pointing to you over there, the light areas only contain actin filaments. And the dark areas, as I've mentioned again, repeating myself, the dark areas just contain myosin only. But the much darker areas, if you can see that, I'm not so sure if you can see that through the video, but the much darker area appear because of the overlap between actin filaments and myosin filaments. That's why that area starts to become much darker. And another thing I also want you to notice is, look at the distance of the Z line, or the sarcomere distance in the relaxed muscle. That's the distance of the sarcomere. But in the contracted muscle, you notice that the sarcomere distance has reduced. So the filaments have actually moved, okay? So the question here is, how do the filaments move? We need to talk about that in the next video. But to summarize in this case here, as you can see, okay, so what I'm going to do is, if you're not exactly sure, I'm going to draw out the same structures again. You have the myofibril, just a small section of the myofibril right here. It's relaxed. You can see a dark area and you can see a light area. Now, I'm just going to do I say animation, but what I'm just going to do is a very simple thing where I'm just going to show you how the thin filaments move. So look at the thin filaments. They're moving inwards towards that part of the filaments moving towards the right side. And then the actin and myosin filament overlap, which creates an even darker area. Okay, and I'm also going to do it for the other side of the actin filaments. So you see, that part moves to the right, and then that part also overlaps with the myosin filament to create an even darker area. So this is what happens during the contraction of the muscle. So that's why when the sarcomere distance reduces, the distance shortens, right? And when every part of the myofibril does this, what happens to the overall length of the muscle? The overall length of the muscle becomes short. That's what happens. So when it's contracting, the sarcomere distance reduces between the two Z lines, and when it's relaxing, the distance increases again. So this is what I want you to understand about this. Another very important thing is, sometimes in the exam, they may ask you about something called zones. So what we have done is, we have split the myofibril into different zones as well. So what do I mean by these zones is as follows. We have the three zones, which are known as the A zone, H zone, and I zone. The A zone is usually the place where it can be the darkest. And the A zone usually contains myosin filaments. It contains the entire length of the myosin filaments, and it may also contain overlapped actins. I need you to be careful with this part right here. It contains myosin filaments always, and it may contain overlapping actin filaments. The H zone, which is the second darkest area, and it contains only myosin filaments. That's what I want you to understand. And the I zone is the lightest area because it contains only actin filaments. So I'm showing you the myofibril, a section of a myofibril right here. I'm going to switch it. Okay, relaxed at the top, contracting at the bottom. Now, where is the A zone? The A zone, I told you, it must contain the entire length of the myosin filament, and it may also contain any overlapping actin filament. So that part is the A zone right there for the relaxed muscle, because at this point it's just containing only the entire length of myosin filament. But at the bottom, for the contracting muscle, notice, like I said, based on definition, it contains the entire length of the myosin filaments, and it will also contain overlapping actin filaments. That is the A zone as well. So either when the muscle is relaxing or contracting, the A zone does not change. The A zone's length always remains constant. You need to understand that. It's a little bit confusing, I know, but you need to understand that part. Let's move on to the H zone. For the relaxed muscle, by definition, H zone only contains myosin filament. So during the muscle's relaxed state in the myofibril, the H zone for the relaxed muscle will also be the same, almost the same length as the A zone, because it only contains myosin filaments. But in the contracted muscle, notice the H zone has become smaller because lesser parts of the myofibril contains only myosin. So that section is the H zone. As the muscle contracts, the H zone will become shorter. That's what we have to understand. And of course, I zone for the relaxed muscle, actin filaments only, the light areas only. That's the length of the I zone, and when it contracts, the I zone also decreases as well, because certain parts of it will overlap with the myosin filament. So if we just take the actin filaments only, the length has decreased. So please know your zones in detail as well. A zone will always remain constant, no matter what, whether it's contracting or relaxing. Some students will be like, but you said that the A zone has to be the darkest, so shouldn't it include only the very dark area or the darkest region? It should, but for some reason we have decided to say that the A zone remains constant. Okay, just go with it for the purpose of your exam. It's a little bit confusing, I know, but I hope you understand that part.